Oh yeah, baby. Right. Sounds good. It's cold, baby. Cold enough to freeze water. Yep. Okay. Chapter 26. The Amulet. Hold on. Chapter 26. The Amulet. The infant slept peacefully, curled within its nest of twigs and leaves. For the rudeness of its bed, it seemed at ease and quite comfortable. More importantly, it seemed secure in the presence of the fawn that slept beside it. The animal's soft body curved round it for additional warmth in the tiny grotto. Then something so faint it might have been more sense than sound, a disturbance of the aura, the peacefulness, or a scent of evil, snapped the fawn awake. It lifted its sleek head, its brown eyes fixed upon the opening of the burrow, its eyes cocked, looking out to where a watery sunlight filtered in. It held its position that way for a long moment, listening. Then, slowly, it unwound itself round the sleeping child and climbed to its stocky legs. The baby stirred a bit uneasily, and the fawn looked down toward it with a very human expression of concern. But it curled itself deeper into its nest and relaxed again and stayed asleep. The fawn moved silently, carefully, out of the burrow, pausing just outside to look round. It was early. Morning light fell sluggishly through a heavy morning fog, turning it to swirling, milky haze that filled up the small, steep-sided valley. It was very still. Even the sounds of morning birds were muffled in the fog. The fawn took a few tentative steps into the glade, looking round sharply in a suspicious way. Still listening. Then the faint bird sound stopped abruptly. The fawn stiffened, directing its attention straight ahead. The scraping sounds of footsteps were now audible, coming closer through the fog, and accompanying them a sharp, rhythmic tapping. And then there was a shadow, faint outline, far away but moving swiftly nearer through the fog, taking on form and shape until its outline was clearly visible. It was a tall figure, wrapped and hooded in a long, dark robe against the chill. In one hand, it clasped a rod of gnarled wood, polished to black and shining softly, using it as a staff as it strode forward with the long, arrogant stride of a master of its domain. On coming in sight of the fawn, it stopped a good distance away. It lifted its free hand to the hood and pulled it back, exposing the scarred countenance of the dark druid. "Well, my little fawn, here I am again," he said in a grim way. "You have had more days of your lonely life here, and I have come to put my question to you once more. Will you agree to accept me? Will you give me your love and save both yourself and your child?" The fawn's only response was to lift its head higher and fix its brown eyes firmly on him in a defiant glare. His face grew darker in anger. "You fool," he said with venom, taking a step forward. "How long will you defy me? How long can you tolerate this?" As if he had violated some invisible boundary in his forward step, the deer retreated, taking up a defensive position before the cave's mouth, body sideways to block him. He made a gesture of disgust and stepped back. "Pah! I'll not violate your precious safety. I'll come no closer. You have nothing to fear. But you cannot forever stay here. No." His voice became insinuating. "No. You care for the child too much. Your own need to protect it will betray you. Soon it will crawl, and then walk. It will wish to leave, but it will have no place to go. It will wish to talk, but you will not speak to it. You will cry out for the ability to speak. You will not be able to explain to it. You will not be able to teach it to be human. You will watch it develop, helpless to act. Ooh. You will watch it not learn to walk, but to crawl, its legs and arms stunted, knobbed, and bent. It will mewl and whine and snort. It will become a beast, a deformed creature as awful as the creations within my Sid, if it survives. And how long can you stand that? think I looked in the back and it had definitions and pronunciations. So sob would be sava. So I looked that up. I should read. In response, she lifted her head a little more stubbornly. You are still defiant, he said. Or you try bravely to seem so. But sooner or later, you will realize that there is no other chance for you. No one will come to save you this time. No friend will help you to escape, and no one will ever find you here. I will keep trying. One day, Sava, one day you will submit. He turned and stalked away into the mist. His footsteps, interspersed with the tap-tap of the stick on the rocky ground, faded away. Once he was gone, the fawn turned and went back into the cave, looked down at the sleeping infant, which too long deprived of the familiar warmth and comforting presence and security of the fawn's body was stirring restlessly. Near to waking, its face wrinkled. The fawn settled in softly round him, its body surrounding him. It looked down at the face, and concern was in its eyes. All it could do was to nuzzle the baby softly and rock gently, moving the tiny form. The infant relaxed again, sleeping contentedly. But the fawn did not go back to sleep. It stayed looking down at the child, a distinctly human helplessness and sorrow glowing in its dark eyes. Change scene. Bands of warriors marched away from the hill of the sons of Midhir, Fionn clans with their chiefs and Shi bands with their kings, dispersing to return to their own territories. Just below the mound, the rest of the warriors were still gathered, making their own preparations to depart. Above them, Finn stood before the house with his comrades, Mjoran and Luibra, and others of the children of Midhir, watching the departures. Well, looks as if the time's come for me to be starting off myself, Finn announced. Not alone, said Cowlight. This is something that only I must do, Finn told him firmly. You'll never succeed alone, Cowlight shot back. You'll still need a guardian every moment of the day. Why, look what happened the last time you got out of my sight. No, Finn. If you're going, then so am I. I'm going as well, proclaimed the little nut. Now remember, little nut is he's she. He's of the she. So, but it's even more dangerous for you than for Cowlight, Finn argued. You're of the she. He'll have special reason for wanting to kill you. Don't waste your words, Finn McCoomhole. Wait, okay, pronunciation, baby. So, you would say, where is it? Cool, like K-O-O-A, and then a dash A-L. That's how they put it. There's a lot of different pronunciations. Okay. Don't waste your words, Finn McCoomhole, the harper told him stubbornly. I may have won forgiveness from you, but not from myself. Until Sava has been returned to you and that black monster destroyed, I won't be content again. Finn nodded. I understand, he said resignedly. Though I wish it could be otherwise, I'll not stop you. He turned to look at Mjoran. Let's see if I'm saying her name right. Probably not, huh? If her name pops up, I'll bet it does. Give me a chance. Oh, it's not in the list, so sorry. It's in here somewhere. Okay. Focus. Daniel-san. It'll be the hardest saying goodbye to you, he told her with great feelings, talking to Bjorn, Dawn's sister of the mid-hair children. I'll think of you, and I of you, she told him. She threw her arms about him in a great hug. I wish good fortune to you, Finn McCombhall. I said it wrong again. Qual. I thank you for the freedom you've given us, and I'll pray to Danu that you discover what you're seeking. She stepped back and he turned toward the physician, putting a hand on his shoulder in a last gesture of friendship. And what about you, Luibra? He asked. You're free now as well. What will you do? Oh, I don't know, he said in a casual way. This is a pleasant sort of place. I thought I might just hang out for a time. He looked at Murin with a broad grin. I've gotten quite used to the people here. She smiled in return, and Finn smiled too, nodding in an understanding way. So with their farewells complete, Finn and his companions moved down the hillside to where his own warriors and those of Morna clan were gathered. Before we leave, Finn, Gol MacMorna said to him, I wanted you to know that the chieftains of the clans have spoken to me. There's not a one of them that feels you shouldn't remain captain of the Fians, including myself. It's a great honor you all do me, Finn answered. But until this has been finished, I'll ask no Fian warrior to accept my leadership again. It's my request that you return to Olmhuin, and see to the running of the clans. If I don't return, then there's no better man to take the captaincy. If I do, he shrugged, well, then we'll see. Very well, Captain, Gol said, pointedly putting an emphasis upon the title. I'll do as you've asked, but your chair at the feasting table will be empty until you return, as I know you will. Luke Hade now moved up behind him, facing Finn with a determined look. Finn, he said, the others of our clan and I ask you to let us go with you. Finn fixed a stern and scrutinizing gaze on the young warrior. Luke Hade, you told me once that if I continued with my quest, it was as a madman and not your chieftain that I did it. I can't ask you to follow me now, and I don't expect any of my clansmen to risk themselves. I'll not apologize for those words, Luke Hade said reasoningly. Your quest then was a mad one. Still, there is some sorrow in us that we abandoned you, and now it's no aimless search you're going on. You mean to battle against the Dark Druid. It's much help you could be needing to succeed. And we, your clansmen, your sworn warriors and friends, we mean to go with you. Finn smiled and clapped a hand to his shoulder. It's an honest man you are, Luke Hade, and I'd be truly a madman to deny your help. Any warrior, Bashin, it's not said Bashin either, so I'm going to correct a few things I said wrong. It's Baskna, like Baskna, Baskna clan. Okay. Any warrior of the Baskna clan who is willing can come and be welcomed. Finn, called the warrior then, and they turned to see Bod Durg moving down the hill from the house of the mid-hears in company with Don. Before you leave, I must speak once more with you. And privately, the Daedanon king said as he reached the waiting men. Finn moved away from the others, walking off a few paces with Don and Bod Durg as the others watched with curiosity. The king addressed the captain in a conspiratorial voice, his words grave. Vir Dorsh, the dark druid, vile as he is, has broken no de Danann laws, and I can ask none of my people to act against him. I didn't expect it, Finn said. You've done enough in giving me the location of his Cid. Still, the king persisted. I can't have you thinking that I condone what he's done to you. I've long wished for some excuse to destroy that creature and his evil lot myself. You're intending to try to do so? Then I feel bound to give you what help I can. What kind of help? Finn asked. Very limited, I'm afraid, Bod Durg said frankly. First of all, you may find the Cid of the Druid without much difficulty, but without de Danann guidance, you will never be able to reach it. So I found a volunteer to go along with you. He gestured toward Dawn. Dawn? Said Finn, looking toward him. That's right. The young man agreed. Bod Durg can ask none of his own people, but I'm not bound by those constraints. I can take you through the Druid's barriers and into his hidden place. But why should you risk yourself? Finn asked. Because we owe you a great debt, and I wish to pay it. Dawn answered proudly. It's a small enough return, but there is something else, said the she leader. You may not even survive long enough to reach the Druid's lair without some other help. You see, he has been watching you. Watching me? Finn said, and began to turn his head to look around. Careful, the king warned. They can't let him know what I am saying to you. Knud Royal told me that he suspected this, and I'm convinced he is right. Peter Dorsch has been spying upon you and knows your every move. When he realizes you are starting toward him once again, he will use every kind of magic and treachery against you. You've already had a taste of his powers. But what can we do against them? Well, I can't give you a magic to counter his, but I can at least give you a chance to reach him unharmed. I think I have a means to blind him. He'll have no way to know when you are coming against him, or from where, or in what numbers, at least until you are very near to him. From there, you will be on your own. Of course, I'll gladly accept your help, Finn told him. But what do you mean to do? From a leather pouch, Bod Durg pulled a round amulet of glowing red stone, holding it palmed so that only Finn could see. This should counter Fyodor's magic, at least. I hope so. We can only see. How? Finn asked. Just walk back to your men. Continue your preparations to depart, Bod Durg advised. I'll see to the rest. Meanwhile, from a vantage point high above the plain, the dark druid and his seer stood looking down upon the departing hosts. You see, she said, sweeping a hand over the scene. From their height, the streams of the warriors flowing out in all directions. From the central mound looked like wheel spokes radiating from a hub. They are all dispersing. Their great war is ended. And leaving Makul alive. The druid said angrily, "Where is he?" He swept a hand forward and the bubbles swooped down closer to the group. "Here he is," she said, suspending it close above the Boskna group. Back with his warriors again and quite as fit as ever he looked. Beer said, unhappily, "O Malakrad, you have truly failed me. Now he has his memory again. He has been reunited with his warriors, and he has gained the friendship of Bodurg. He is more powerful than ever. Look here, she retorted. In what I did, I succeeded. None of this is my fault. Anyway, he's no greater a threat to you now than he ever was. No threat? And where do you think he'll be coming now? You mean here? She asked in surprise. But how? You don't believe Bodurg might tell him, betray the oath, and reveal another Cid to mortals? I do. There's no love between our good High King and myself. He's long been jealous of my power. If there is any chance Finn has learned of my whereabouts, I need to know it. So, my dear, keep a close watch upon your captain. Tapped her arm lightly but meaningfully with the knob of his Druid rod. And don't fail me this time. Stay close. Stay very close. Down on the plain, the last of the groups were preparing to start out. Bodurg stood at one side of the Boskna men with Finn, apparently watching them, but surreptitiously casting searching glances up at the skies about him. Finally, he seemed to note something, his eyes fixed upon one point for an instant, then shifted quickly away. What is it? Finn asked, noting his odd move. Started to lift his head to look as well, but the king stopped him. No, Finn, don't look yet. I think I've discovered what I was seeking. There is something floating above us now. Glance up and to your left, but do it carefully. Don't make a big show of it. Finn casually glanced up. He almost missed it, but then, against the edge of a drifting cloud, he noted it. A faint spot of distortion, cloaking, like the wavering caused by heat. I see something, Finn said. A pale circle of shimmering light, questioningly. That's it, said the king. I'm certain that's I'm certain that's it. The way the Druid is watching you. It's a magical force of some kind, projected by a woman of the She, a Druidess, and seer called Malakrod. She left us to join him years ago as a result of her rather bizarre practices and unusual appetites. A dark woman. Finn asked with curiosity, very beautiful. Ah, I see you've met her, the king said, eyeing him meaningfully. He has that, Gnu Royal put in with a leering smile. It really wasn't me, Finn protested quickly. But what happens now? Now you simply watch, Bodurg replied. We'll have to wait and see if this light comes closer. I may only have one chance, and I want to be certain it's a success. Back in the Druidess's lair, the two were observing the preparations. It looks to me as if they're nearly ready to start away from here, she said. Most likely they'll go to the south, back toward his home. I don't trust him, Fear said. You keep watching and stay closer. Closer, I said. Yes, she responded with annoyance. Closer. Then with obvious intent and a malicious smile, she waved downward sharply. This caused the bubble to drop with stomach-wrenching abruptness to within a spear's throw of the ground. The Druid's face tightened with a spasm of nausea. I'll stand no more of this place, he said irritably. Inform me at once when you've discovered Where they're bound, he ordered and turned to stride out of the room. Below, noting that the faint shimmer had dropped very low, Bo-Derg lifted the amulet up, the jewel dangling from his hand. "All right," he said to Finn. "Be ready. I'm not certain just what will happen." Then, in a swift move, he swept the jewel high, holding it up toward the round, shimmering patch. The druidess saw his move, and her gaze went to the amulet. She froze her eyes, widening with shock, as they registered what it was he held. "No!" she screamed in terror, leaping to her feet. "No!" Below her, the amulet flared suddenly with an intense ruby light. Chapter 27, Blinding the Druid. That was the end of chapter 26. The light spouted from the round amulet in a stream, growing broader as it shot upward from inside the crystal sphere of Malakrod. It seemed as if it were a ball of energy that was rising toward her with incredible speed. The druidess desperately waved her hands upward in an attempt to lift the sphere to safety, but her reaction was too slow. The beam struck. There was an explosion that shattered the fiery stream into 1,000 tendrils of blue-white lightning that spread out round the sphere with an intense crackling of power. From below, the seer's bubble became suddenly visible as solid, red-tinged sphere encircled and trapped by the flickering network of lines. Within the curved glass walls returned a shimmering, blinding white. Luckrod screamed in agony. A long, shrill sound met and matched and drowned by a sharp sizzling as energy flaring round the spheres. The sphere's circumference began to flash inward. Bolts of light from every side shot like spears, all toward Malakrod, drawn to the source of the sphere's existence, seeking the magic heart of its power. They attached to her, actually seeming to sink into her flesh like barbed points. She froze, stiffening as they caught her, enmeshed her, pulled her up, taut, and held her rigid but vibrating from the energy coursing through her and over her, pulsing about her, filling up the ball. They formed another writhing web of lights with her. The captive fly at its center, her eyes dazzlingly aglow, the blue light that filled them, fixed on Fyodorsh. "Help me!" she managed to cry out. The dark druid was for a moment held fascinated, horrified at the sight, but as the light swiftly intensified, he turned away, leaping into the corridor. She tried again to scream after him, but was now too imprisoned by the enveloping power. Her open mouth filled with coiling serpents of light. The dark druid started up the corridor at a run as the light flared behind him. But he took only 2 steps before there came an enormous explosion. A wind blasted up the tunnel, knocking him down, watching a torrent of wind, light, and debris over him. In the main cavern, the creatures of the dark druid looked up as the sound of the explosion reached them. They saw the torrent it created shoot from the tunnel mouth, knocking the ram-headed guards aside and jetting far out into the air of the vast space, ends curling back like a flickering tongue before it faded. At the same time, but some distance away, the party of Finn watched the fingers of the lightning flicker round the reddish spear, grow for an instant brighter, like a meteor in its final plunge, then die away, leaving an empty sky. "Well, that's gone, anyway," Bo-Derg said with satisfaction. If I was right, the Dark Druid won't be using that method to spy on you again. Aye, but he might have other ways, Canute Royal said. Once you're beneath the umbrella of the forest about the man's lair, you should be able to approach him, the king replied. It'll be more difficult for him to set traps. Then it's time for us to be going, Cowlight put in. The more swiftly we can come against him, the more chance we have to keep him off guard. So making their final farewells to the others, Finn's company left the plain of Midhere's children, heading toward the north and west. The warriors and the hounds moved at such a rapid pace that the horse of Canute Royal nearly galloped to keep up. Meantime, in the Druid's lair, the crumpled form of Fyodorsh slowly stirred. Debris matting his back fell away as he sat up and then, with an effort, levered himself to his feet. He was unhurt, but much ruffled and clearly shaken. He looked round dazedly. It was dark in the corridor. The torches had been blown out, and there was only a faint glow coming from the opening to the chamber of the glass sphere. The only sound was the rising voices of commotion from the astonished inhabitants in the outer cavern. Fear stepped back to the opening into the sphere. Here he stopped, staring ahead, eyes wide with shock. The curved walls had lost all but the faintest glow. Their polished surfaces were crazed or scorched dark, like a glass bead suspended in a fire, from the enormous power that had been directed back through the sphere by the amulet of Bodurg. And in the center of the floor, upon the scorched and still smoldering remains of once plush cushions, lay crumpled a tattered, blackened form. He stepped toward it. Impossibly, it shifted. Agonizingly, it moved. Slowly, a head rose up, lifting a face toward his. Could barely be called a face. All its wealth of hair, its lashes and eyebrows had been burned away. The flesh of its face had been withered, its fullness sucked from it, its nose whittled to a sharp beak, its teeth protruding, leaving it little more than a skull. Indeed, the whole body, revealed by the shredded gown, had been horribly wasted, the skeletal remains of the once lush form covered by a dry, wrinkled skin like crumpled parchment. It was as if, when the life force she used to power the sphere had been reversed upon her, it had drained her vitality, leaving her a mummy but a living one. She lifted a bony hand toward him in a gesture of supplication. Her lipless mouth moved as if she were trying to speak. Then she fell back, breathing loudly through the wasted remnant of her once elegant nose. But her eyes, like polished marbles, glinted in the dark pits of her sockets, stayed fixed upon him. He stared at her a moment. The shock in his face at first registered, changing to intense revulsion. Then, abruptly, he turned his back on the pitiful wreck and strode out of the room, propelled by a great urgency. Face set, rushed down the tunnel and he rushed down the tunnel and out onto the landing. Some of the Druid's people were swarming up the stairs in response to the blast. A large crowd of others were milling excitedly about below. He leaned over the rail, shouting out to them in a voice that echoed in the vast space. "Send out the warriors! Send out the bears and the pukas!" They looked up to him. He was a wild and desperate-seeming figure there, his long form bent far out over the open space, his torn robe and his tangled hair fluttering about him. "Double the guards about the mount," he ordered. "Watch all the perimeters and the domains. Keep careful watch. I must know if anyone approaches us. Be on guard. Or you be on guard." Finn must be coming here. Turned and saw the two ram's-headed guards of the seer struggling to their feet, still bewildered by the blast. "And you too," he said brusquely, gesturing up to the corridor. "Go in there and take care of that." "There," Dawn at last said, pointing ahead. "There is the place Bod Durg told me of. There is Ben Gaelbane." How do you say it? It's a very famous mountain in Ireland. Let's look it up. Real quick reference. Oh well. Thought I saw it. Anyway, it's a very large mountain. Okay. One second. Okay. Okay. There is Ben Gaelbane. Finn stared curiously ahead. On the horizon, thrusting up from the forest, was a ridge of purple-gray mountains, its southern end rising into a knobbed peak. "But I've seen that place before," Finn exclaimed. He looked to Cowlight. "Haven't we?" "Aye, we have," the Dark Warrior agreed. "And it was just before we were waylaid at the lake. There, in those woods farther to the south." "No wonder then," said Dawn. "He knew that you were getting close. That's why he acted against you. Well, this time he won't see you. Still," he added cautiously, "he's bound to be on guard, and it'll be a dangerous journey for us once we reach the outer boundary of his domains. From there, we will go most carefully." They moved on, still sweeping along at a swift pace, the sturdy Fionn warriors showing no signs of fatigue. They entered the forested lands that lay just before the mount, pushing on through the more rugged country of hills and lakes. Into an ever denser growth, they went more slowly now, more warily, mindful of watchers or traps. Then suddenly ahead of them, a shape reared up in the bushes. Before any of them could react, it dove out, rushing between them and knocking them aside, then darting away. It looked to the casual eye like a great stag, but the quick-eyed Canute Royal spotted the strange cat-like feet of it as it leaped across a bush, and he knew the truth. "Look there," he shouted. "A puka. Stop it. It'll warn the Druid." Finn and his party were after it at once, bounded through the trees, but so large was it that it had heavy going, the dense underbrush slowing it down. In the open, it might even have outrun them all. As it was, all of the others of Finn's party dropped behind, leaving only Finn, Cowlight, and the hounds to keep on slowly catching up with it. It crashed along, straining to get ahead, but they continued closer. Then it gave a shout in a coarse but distinctly human voice that brought looks of surprise to Finn and Cowlight. "Oi, oi, Angus, take off, it's them." Just ahead, another beast, this one like a great wolf lifted from the brush, turned a startled face toward them, then turned and ran. "Cowlight, you and Skillon, get that one," Finn shouted, pointing toward the stag. but on with me. He and one hound veered off after the second creature, while the other pair kept on after the first. The stag-like puka, seeing its pursuit cut in half, now turned on Cowlight, reared up. The form of it began to change right before him, building a grotesque way, legs thickening, lengthening, forelegs filling out to brawny arms, stag's face thrusting outward into a long snout, fangs erupting from the lengthening lower jaw. My Danu, Cowlight breathed, looking up at the growing thing, then prudently deciding not to wait for it to become whatever monstrous creature it was changing to. He simply heaved his spear at it with all his force. Its point slashed deep into the belly of the puka, seeming to rend it, whole being convulsed, and as if it were a punctured wineskin began to sag down as it did. It began to go through a rapid series of shape shifts, a plethora of animal parts altering, mixing, jerking the animal about so violently it seemed as if it would be torn apart. It ended suddenly and finally in a horrible mixture not even recognizable. The puka shuddered one last time and then mercifully was still. Meantime, Finn and Braun were pursuing the other creature. As a wolf, it was, lither and speedier in the brush. Only by their greatest efforts did Finn and the hound keep it from gaining on them, dodged and turned for some while, trying to lose the pursuit, but without luck. Finally, when the thing realized it couldn't shake them off, it desperately tried something else. When it reached the next opening with a good patch of open sky showing above, it began to transform. It was far enough ahead to effect this change before Finn and Braun came up, and it was clear why it needed open space. It swiftly sprouted enormous wings and tail, and not even taking time to alter the wolf's body shape, leaped upward, flapping madly to pull itself from the ground. Finn and Braun came into the open just as it started to rise. Finn cast his spear, but the puka was far enough up already to maneuver, swooping round in a tight bank to dodge the spear. This lost its altitude, however. It began to flap again, straining to lift itself out of their reach. Braun, moving ahead of Finn, leaped for a dangling leg and missed. Finn dropped the storm shield, crouched, and made a leap of his own as it came over his head, grabbing onto a leg with one hand. But the creature, by an immense effort, still managed to flap higher, lifting him up with it. It rose slowly, fighting to get above the trees, but Finn's weight was too much. Suddenly, exhausted, one of its wings folded and it went over, sweeping down to crash into the upper branches of a large oak. In a tangle of branches and wings and flailing limb, Finn and the puka fought. Creature struck out with claws and teeth. Finn tried to swing away from its reach long enough to draw his sword. Snapped out, pulled back, nearly falling, clutching a branch to dangle by its right hand. But to dangle only by his right hand. So that's Finn. He looked up to see the creature altering to the shape of a great cat. Claws shot out to grip the tree firmly. It began slinking out toward him, grinning evilly. He felt for his sword hilt with his left hand. The cat prepared to leap. His hand closed on the weapon as it sprang. It hurtled toward him as he, in a single move, pulled out the sword, swinging it up. The puka crashed against him, its own weight driving his blade through its breast to erupt from its backbone. Locked together, the two tumbled from the tree, crashing to the ground. Finn lay still a moment beneath the creature, his breath knocked from him. Braun came up to nose at him anxiously. I'm all right, lad, he finally gasped out. And with a grunt of effort, he rolled the heavy carcass off him. Cowlight came into the clearing with Skilon, and they rushed to him. Are you all right? The Dark Warrior asked, helping Finn up. When all my breath comes back to me, Finn answered, panting. What about the other one? Dead, Cowlight said tersely. Let's hope there are no more, Finn said. He looked up and pointed. There's still a way to go, above the trees to the west. The rounded crest of the mount loomed ominously. This time the fawn did not hear the noise until it was close outside the cave. It looked up in alarm as a shadow fell across the entrance, rising from the resting infant hurriedly. Rushed outside, stopping just before the opening. There stood the dark druid, closer to the cave this time, watching. It was grimmer than before. His look, still a bit harried, a bit more desperate, fixed a firm gaze upon her, and his voice was hard. I've come to give a final choice to you, Sova. Give up your stubbornness. Come to me now, of your own will. Put out a hand, palm up, fingers extended. Just touch this hand that I hold out to you in love, in worship. Do it, and I will give you your own form, and you can live in comfort with your child. She stepped back before the doorway as before and stood proudly erect, head lifted, dark eyes blazing in defiance. His look grew dark, a sudden fury blazed in his eyes. Then enough, he said. I will play no more games with you. I have no more patience and no more time. He swept forward, thrusting out his stick. She might have leaped away, but he stayed protectively. But she stayed protectively before the cave, seemingly more concerned for the infant than herself. The stick touched her. It seemed to freeze her. Now, he said in triumph, I have you, and if no other way than in my own, you'll come with me. You have no will to refuse me, Sova. As before, you cannot escape, he gestured behind him with the staff. Come. As if an invisible leash about her neck was hauling upon her, the fawn went with dragging, reluctant steps, following the point of the rod. But as the poor creature moved away from the opening of the cave, there came a sound from within it. The infant, perhaps sensing its loss, feeling loneliness or fear or the cold, stirred uneasily and began to whimper. There were soft, faint sounds of discomfort at first, but they built quickly as they went unanswered. The fawn, with what was clearly an immense effort of will, began to turn her head. Either the cry was stronger than the spell, countering some of the effect, or the spirit of the mother gave her the power. It's true. But either way, her head came round by agonizing degrees, the dark eyes fixing with great anguish on the cave. Forget the child, Sava, the druid said with cruelty. It won't be coming. If you mean to refuse me, then I'll leave you nothing to remind you of your Finn. If you force me to take you, I'll see every part of him destroyed, including his child. I'll see that all of you will have left to you is me. At that, he gave a hard jerk forward with the rod, forcing the fawn more rapidly along. The cries became a wail now as the baby realized it was not to feel any comfort. The fawn continued to look back as it was drawn on. inexorably. Let's see. Anyway, the pair moved out of the glade up to the steep hillside, leaving the child crying in its nest alone as its mother disappeared. So I have, let's see, maybe 2 or 3 chapters left. I'm going to take a break, finish tomorrow. Yeah. Pushed myself to a little more. Yep. And retuned. Out on the trail without failure. Oh, out on the trail. Looks like the odds are evening up now. Hero on the way, hero on the way. Rough as I am, gonna find love, save love, be love, stay easy on the way. On the way. So it's easy, I think it's easy on the way. No, stay true all the way. That's why I find love to stay. Find love to stay. Love to stay. There we go. Then you hawk one, right? The end of the song. No, you don't. Thank you. Great night or day. Circle round.